Welcome to the C45 Association's official YouTube channel. The following presentation is brought to you with support from Sigma Analytical Services with the C45 Association. Sigma Analytical is the only cannabis lab with cross-continental operations in the world and the first cannabis-focused GMP-certified lab in Canada. Our service goes beyond a full panel of testing and also covers stability studies, cleaning validation, formulation and product development support, and more. We have been a front runner in testing Cannabis 2.0 products and have validated methods for vape cartridges and a variety of edibles, topicals, and beverages. Sigma is also Shoppers Drug Mart's partner in medical cannabis by Shoppers and Ecolab's exclusive partner in Canada and South America to run cleaning validation studies for cannabis processors and producers. Our short and dependable turnaround times, in addition to accurate and reliable results and outstanding client support, has made Sigma the preferred lab for many LPs. Sigma also offers support on consulting projects for the producers and labs in Canada, Colombia, the US, and beyond. From method development, validation, and transfer, to support for designing, setting up, and running in-house or independent cannabis labs. For any questions or to start a discussion on how we can assist you, please don't hesitate to contact us. We hope you enjoy the following presentation, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more quality content.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Growing Summit and to this awesome panel that we have for you today, where we are going to be talking about batch testing and analytical testing and how to prevent failing batches, as well as how to deal with a batch in case you have failed, whether it's remediation or some other methods that we can use. So I'd love to introduce our panel to you. We have four amazing panelists from all walks of the industry, from compliance, QA, analytical testing, as well as irradiation. Panelists, I would like to start with Nina. Nina, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Growing Summit. It promises to be quite exciting, and I'm looking forward to interacting with you all, answering some of your questions. So as Kieley rightly said, my name is Nina. I'm the quality assurance person for Verides Natural Health Products Limited, also known as Verides Cannabis. And I've been running the quality affairs of Verides for more than 2 years. I joined the company in December 2018. Before that, I used to be a scientist, a food safety quality assurance scientist back home in Ghana, working with other international scientists. And yes, I'm really glad to be part of this panel and to learn from you as well, and to share my experiences with everyone on quality assurance, testing, and remediation. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. And Rod, can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you. It's great to be here. My name is Raj Mattu. I'm the Global Director of Strategy for Cannabis and Strategic Accounts at Sterigenics. We've been working with cannabis and hemp producers for over 4 or 5 years, representing E-beam and gamma technologies through our GMP facilities in Canada and worldwide. I've worked closely with clients over the years to control and mitigate risk through the use of antimicrobial treatment, also known as irradiation. Good to be here today, and I look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Raj. And we have Anu.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anuraga. I am QAP based out of Calgary. I work with micros and startups. I help them with any kind of compliance aspects, and especially site-specific procedures. My background is in food and pharmaceuticals, and now recently cannabis.
Thank you, Anuraga. And Rod.
Hi, my name's Rod Szarka. I am VP of Marketing and Business Development for Keystone Labs. Keystone Labs is a third-party GMP testing facility to meet Health Canada's requirements. We also do method development, stability studies, environmental monitoring for the cannabis and for pharma as well. and I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Rod. Welcome, everyone. And my name is Kieley, and I am the owner-operator of a Parkland Flower. We are a micro license holder. And so how we're going to kind of do this panel today is basically I'm going to ask all those questions that micros ask when they start getting into the space, or larger LPs as well. We're just basically going to have a conversation and how to basically demystify this analytical testing. There are so many different aspects to testing and different methods, different ways to prevent microbials, and also looking at preventing heavy metals and pesticides and things like that that could contaminate your product. And so, of course, Health Canada has very strict standards, and we want to ensure that we successfully bring safe products to the Canadian marketplace. So first off, I would love to hear from the panel. What are some ways that micro cultivators can prevent failing these testings, and how can they plan for that right at the start before they even put plants in their facilities? What are some methodologies that they can use to ensure that they're gonna pass these types of tests that Health Canada mandates? And I will start with Nina.
Thank you, Kieley. So yes, to ensure your production processes from start to finish is well controlled and well managed, the input materials have to be considered. So it's very important that all input materials are sourced from suppliers who are reliable and suppliers who are also known to stick to quality requirements. So for example, if you are bringing in nutrients to feed your plants and the nutrients are high in heavy metals, the plants will take up these heavy metals and it will remain in the buds, in the flower of the plant. And with heavy metals going out of specification, there's very little you can do to correct that. So input material control is very, very critical. And I would advise that all suppliers of input materials like chemicals are assessed before their products are procured into the facility. Thank you.
Thank you. And then when it comes to something like microbials, Rod, I'd like you to jump in here. What are some things we can do as licensed producers? You know, we've sanitized our facility. We're ready to bring in plants. You know, is there something we can do in between for us to understand how well we're cleaning, and what kind of testing will we be doing in that sense?
Yeah, great question, Kieley. So what we offer at Keystone is environmental monitoring. We are starting to work with licensed producers in this area, particularly monitoring their air and making sure that their bioburden is low in their facility. Testing their water as well, their production water, allows them to, make sure that their bioburden is low and to detect any creep-ins or issues within the facility that they can deal with right away before it becomes a big problem. So environmental monitoring is monitoring the surfaces with contact plates, as well as the air with settling or air monitoring for particles.
Great, thank you so much. So we've grown a product. Actually, I would like to talk about just quickly. We've started growing our product. Now we have a pest outbreak, and so we want to figure out what kind of pesticides. Should we use pesticides? Are we using biologicals? Anu, can you provide some information on how microcultivators can figure out what pesticides would be approved by Health Canada?
So there is a list of approved pesticides for cannabis usage. The easiest way to find them is to Google them, Google for a list of all the approved pesticides for cannabis from Health Canada, and just use that list. There are a lot of micros or cultivators that want to use some biologicals too. So your local biological supply agent would be the best bet to go through. They'll be able to provide right answers for which kind of bio would be useful for which kind of pest.
Thanks, Anu. Great answer. So now we've grown the product, we harvest it, we've dried it, we've trimmed it, and now we are going to get it ready to send to a processor. What are some things, and Raj, I think you can jump in here, what are some things that we can do to ensure that we prevent those microbials, even if we've grown a good product? Some processors either require that you do remediation, or require that you do preventative irradiation, or they'll just go with a passing COA. How do micros or other licensed producers determine what way to go?
It really depends on who the buyer is, for one consideration. If the buyer's requiring that the product be free and clear of microbial contamination, then that's just something that the micro or cultivator has to deal with. Even if product has passed, a consideration should be that the microbial contamination can potentially increase over time. So even if you've passed, you should take that into consideration and know that if a product sits on the shelf for a couple of weeks or sits in inventory for a number of weeks, the regrowth potential is there and should be a consideration. Other than that, it's usually between the buyer and the seller what the requirements are. So know your buyer ahead of time.
And we've seen recalls, right? We've seen recalls in the market, and small producers and big, and it's a large risk to take on. I mean, crops are anywhere from a couple of $1,000s in value to hundreds of thousands of dollars in value. So really looking at what's the size of your crop, right? How big is it? What is the risk if that gets recalled? And is that cost of getting remediation worth it? For myself, we've sent product in, there's a cost of transportation. There's a cost associated with the actual the e-beaming being completed, and there's also a cost associated within the retesting afterwards, and whether you're going to test before or test after. If you're doing it as a preventative, would you test the product before or after you do e-beaming?
I would do it after you've done the e-beaming, but I do recommend regularly to our clients that you should establish a baseline for what your contamination levels are, so that we can look at any adjustments to the dose or other considerations. Really, as a baseline, you need to understand what you're yielding in terms of microbial contamination and how to deal with it. So preventative or being proactive, test afterwards. There are still a number of production facilities that try to produce and test and hope that they fall within the acceptable limits. It's not impossible, but it's difficult, even if you have good growing practices, to grow within the acceptable limits.
Thank you. And Nina, in your experience, when you've had, say, you and I have worked together, we've done testing, and we were looking at, do we test before? Do we test after? Like, you and I went through quite a bit when we were getting that, and then we got Rod involved. Sorry. We got all kinds of extra testing done. Are we, when it comes to the different processes, like say we're doing it into pre-rolls or it's going in for extraction, then that's another key factor that we need to look at. What are some examples of that you've seen in your facility?
Okay, so I'll talk to you about the testing requirements by Health Canada, the cannabis regulations. So the first one is pesticide testing. Health Canada requires pesticide testing on fresh cannabis, if that is what is going to be used in processing, or the dried cannabis before it's also put into processing. If I want to expand on this to mean that fresh cannabis being tested for pesticides means that maybe if the fresh cannabis is going to be used for extraction, or the dried cannabis is going to be milled, it's going to be trimmed, it's going to be used for extraction. Whatever the input cannabis is, it has to be for pesticide pesticides. So that is even before irradiation. And a retained sample of this product, which is supposed to be the input cannabis, whether it's fresh or dried, it's supposed to be kept for retesting. And then we come to the other testing requirements, the cannabinoids, the contaminants, other contaminants. That is supposed to be performed apart from edibles. So for contaminants, edibles are supposed to be performed on the input material. So if as a microprocessor or microcultivator, you are delivering products which are intended to be used for edibles, you only have to test for the pesticides. But if you are delivering for other forms of products, then we have to test the final product after it has been transformed at the last step of processing, excluding packaging, for the contaminants and the cannabinoids. So if we have the dried flower and we want to mill into pre-rolls, there's no need to test the dried flower for microbials, for cannabinoids, etc. Health Canada expects us to test in the final form after milling for the contaminants and the cannabinoids. For edibles, the only test we do on the final product is cannabinoids. All the other tests are done on the input cannabis.
On all the inputs. Okay, wow, thank you so much. That was really informative. And Rod, when it comes to the testing that we do for microbials, so I've noticed that there's two different tests. There's a European pharmacopoeia, and then there's another. You can tell me exactly what they are. If I fail one, can I retest with the other and still pass potentially?
Yeah, Health Canada doesn't really appreciate that. There are two different pharmacopoeias that LPs are following. It's the United States Pharmacopoeia, which goes by the USP, as well as the European Pharmacopoeia, which goes by the EP. They both have different specifications for micro. Some are easier to pass. For example, microbial enumeration for EP has much higher values in the specification, so it's easier to pass, but the absence is much harder. For EP, the microbial enumeration is much harder to pass, but the absence is only in 10 grams as opposed to EP is in 25 grams for salmonella. So it differs for each one. Health Canada does not like you picking and choosing specific tests from the EP and then specific tests for the EP. They don't require, but they do look at this and come back and question you. So it's highly required or highly recommended that you follow one of them through your testing and stick with that.
I'm just going to jump in here because Anu, have you noticed, because I know you've worked at two other LPs and you work with multiple licensed producers, are they doing baseline, are you recommending that they do baseline testing to kind of determine maybe what is the best one? Or is there something that micros can do to understand what may work best for them as a business decision, as well as from a compliance level?
Definitely. The baseline testing would be helpful, but at the end of the day, it depends on what the intended use of the finished product is. Because most of these tests are based on the intended use. So if it's inhalation, you're going to have a different set of tests and their tolerance limits. So it all depends on what your product is and how it is intended to be used.
So if I'm doing dried flower, what is the best, how do I determine what the best test is for that?
I would say go with the inhalation testing because dry flower mostly is for the inhalation. But if it is bulk flower and it is going to go for further processing, whether it's resin extraction or any of the further products, then a different set of rules might come into play.
So to add on to what Rod said and Anu, truly Health Canada does not like when we pick and choose certain parameters from different pharmacopoeia. In our very last inspection, which was very recent, they mentioned that they are looking out for a release criteria which should be linked to one specific pharmacopoeia. So for dried cannabis, if an LP is using USP, they expect to see the USP specifications for all the contaminants, all the parameters Health Canada is looking out for. If it's EP, they expect to see only EP. They don't want to see total aerobic count EP and then total yeast and molds USP. They want to see your releasation from one pharmacopoeia. And to add on to what Anu said about the dried flower being linked with inhalation, in December 2020, I think it was 30th December or so, Health Canada sent out a communique regarding specifications for dried cannabis because they had quite an outcry regarding these very strict limits on inhalation. They did say in that statement set limits linked with oral linked for oral usage. So truly, the dried cannabis limits can be linked with the limits which we were previously using, that's the 5.18, linked with herbal drugs for oral consumption. Yeah, I can confirm that because Health Canada did that communique.
Thank you. Raj, I want to go back to the irradiation side of things that, you know, we've done our best to have a clean facility. We've done some baseline testing, and you mentioned the word dosing when it comes to irradiation, and then there's different kinds of irradiation. Can you kind of explain on your side you know, what this dosing means and what irradiation means for the product, like in quality?
Sure. Let's start with the good part. The quality aspect of cannabis. There's little to no material changes that are observed. With e-beam, we often solicit feedback from customers, clients, asking what their experience using e-beam has been. Most commonly heard feedback is that the THCA has increased post-treatment. Maybe Rod can attest to that. Maybe he can't. I'm not sure if labs would keep track of that sort of stuff. But THC actually increases with the use of e-beam. Like I said, we offer both e-beam and gamma technologies or modalities, they're called. E-beam is a quick process. The product's under the beam for 15-20 seconds. With the gamma process, it can be exposed to the irradiation source for an extended period of time. So e-beam has grown to be the more desired option in the cannabis industry. But both accomplish the same result, which is to reduce the amount of microbial population or content in the product, and both are highly effective in doing so. The dose is the intensity or strength of how the cannabis or any product is exposed to our method, if you will, of sterilization or irradiation, these days called antimicrobial treatment. Generally, there is a correlation between the amount of microbial content and the strength of the dose. And that's something that we work with each individual client on case by case. And that's really a part of our onboarding process.
Thank you. Go ahead, Nina.
Thank you. So when it comes to testing after irradiation, I don't think we've talked about that already. I know most LPs are looking at irradiation as a form of only microbial remediation. So after irradiation, only the microbials and or the microbial metabolites, that is the aflatoxins or pratoxins, are tested for. Per Health Canada, they consider irradiation to be a processing step. testing of the product after processing should cover all contaminants plus the cannabinoids, except the pesticides, which should have been tested on the input materials. Well, they did say that if the LP has validation studies with conclusions that there are no significant differences in the other contaminants, the phytocannabinoids and the microbial metabolites, that can be waived, but then the microbial testing should still be done on the irradiated products. So I know most of us are only testing for microorganisms and aflatoxins, but Health Canada expects us to test for everything after irradiation.
Okay, so you can test for pesticides prior to the irradiation on your initial inputs, whether it's fresh flower or dried flower. Once that test is done, we're good for pesticides. You no longer have to test for pesticides anymore. There's most likely not going to be an introduction of pesticides after the fact.
Yeah.
But for any other processes, irradiation, putting something into pre-rolls, then making it into extracts, then we are going to have to retest everything, heavy metals, the microbials, as well as the cannabinoid content, correct?
Yes, you're right.
Great. Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to clarify that and get that out there clear for our audience, because I know that's a big question. When do I test? Because I myself, as someone who's just recently entered the space, we've been licensed for 8 months, and I have done a lot more testing than I needed to. Simply because we weren't sure when things were going to be tested for. And so this really is important to work with your suppliers, such as, Sterigenics or your laboratory like Keystone or A&L or other laboratories. Working with these folks and asking them questions is really important to determining exactly step by step, and then record that. Pro tip to licensed producers out there: record each step and how you do it. Put that into your SOP, exactly when and where and what test and how you're going to do it. Anu, can you touch a little bit on that when you're doing an SOP for batch testing and batch releasing? What are some key things that you're looking for?
Before even going there, I'd like to add 2 points for the discussion that was done before. So yes, the pesticide testing needs to be done only after processing. Before going to any processing step. But consider what kind of inputs you're using. So say, for example, you're using a filter paper. Some of the filter paper has been found positive for some of the pesticides. So be very careful in who you select as your supplier to provide all those inputs. And also any kind of hand washes or other kind of chemicals that you use in the facility. Make sure that they don't have any of the pesticides that are on the prohibited list to make sure that they're not getting transferred onto your product. Because Health Canada can always go into the market, select a few products and have them tested. And if they come out to be positive, then that is going to be an issue. So be extra careful in what you're selecting and how your processes are going to be. So as a segue into that, yes, when you're doing creating your SOPs, make sure that you're including everything in your documentation. So if it is not recorded, then it means that it didn't happen. So don't consider all your records or documents or these procedures as only QA procedures. Treat them as your actual procedures. Don't segregate them into QA and non-QA, because then it is going to be a headache. You don't want to do them because that in your mind, that comes up as an extra work. No, consider everything right from the start to the end, create an SOP for each step, and make sure that it is documented somewhere.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to Anu's regarding filter papers. We're seeing a lot of testing in the industry now for heavy metals and pesticides with rolling paper companies getting that C of A for their clients.
And can I touch on that, Rod?
Awesome.
When it comes to doing the testing on the rolling papers, is there a way? So, say I get a batch of rolling papers in, or cones, or whatnot. Can I, instead of myself getting it tested, I would put that onus on the supplier. What are some things that we should be asking for as an LP of a supplier when it comes to that kind of testing?
Yeah, you definitely ask for a C of A of the product for each batch. They should be testing it and supplying that to you. Again, the risk does go to you as well. You have to accept that C of A, assuming it's from a reputable testing lab. You may want to do a couple of tests at the beginning just to confirm your vendor for that supply. Maybe the first couple of batches, do your own internal testing just to confirm that, because it is your responsibility. If there is an issue with your product that you're using their product, and then move to a more spread out test where you're maybe testing every third batch and developing a track record with that client or with that supplier.
Excellent. And Nina wants to jump in there.
Yes. So as well, when it comes to your procedures for sampling and testing, we are supposed to ensure that validated methods are being used for analyzing the cannabis products. The onus lies on the license holder, the one who requests for the testing, to ensure that the laboratory they're asking the testing from is using validated test methods. Health Canada is also very particular about this. I'll give one example. So like Rod said earlier on, the USP standards want, for example, salmonella absent in 10 grams, but the EP method wants salmonella absent in 25 grams. I've seen COAs from some license holders that just mentioned salmonella absent. I know one LP which got a minor non-compliance for that during an inspection, because we are supposed to set the limits, the specification. So if it's absent in 25 grams based on the EP, the lab is supposed to use that validated method to ensure that they are testing at least 25 grams of the sample or reporting absent in 25 grams. And the onus lies on the license holder to ensure this is being done by the laboratory. The second aspect to it is linked with pesticide testing. Health Canada expects the license holder to review the limits of quantification from the testing lab. The testing lab's limit of quantification should be lower than or equal to the limits established by Health Canada. So, for instance, if for propiconazole, Health Canada establishes a limit of 0.01. The testing lab's limit of quantification should be 0.01 or lower. And just in case the testing laboratory identifies propiconazole if the limit of quantification for the testing lab is, let's assume, 0.001, and then the testing lab quantifies propiconazole at 0.005, it is higher than the limit of quantification for the testing lab, but still lower than Health Canada limit, within 7 business days of receiving any positive pesticide results that are above the limit of quantification of the laboratory. So this is another tip that is, I think, is very good for all of us to have in our care and to have in mind.
Wow, thank you so much. Are there any, I'm just going to kind of do a little round table here. Are there any points that I didn't touch on with regards to batch testing and compliance with regards to Health Canada? I know I have a few points at the end here. Anu, go right ahead.
On the sampling itself, I know there are a few operators who want to get the best flower. They want to pick the best flower to send out for testing. Don't do that. Try to get as representative sample as possible so that you're actually making sure that your end result matches your entire batch. Not that your sample is great, but at the end, if the entire batch is not matching to that sample result, then you're out of spec.
what are the consequences of that?
Well, the first consequence would be could be a recall, which could be very expensive, and it could damage your brand name too. So you don't want that. And the other could be any kind of other further repercussions from the recalls. So you'll have to do a complete change of your procedures and do a lot of corrective actions based on that. So that could turn out to be very expensive and lengthy.
Raj, do you have any final points?
I have one thing just regarding batch size as well as for particularly for potency. We only need 0.2 grams of a sample to actually do the test. So sometimes when we tell people that, they send us one bud. That is not a good representation of their batch. So they have to really think about how big their batch is and what is going to be a reasonable sample size. In pharma, there are calculations that you have to use to determine that. And a lot of times in pharma, they will, during their production line, they will take a sample from the beginning throughout the middle of the production and at the end. What we recommend minimum is 10 grams, where we grind it up and make a very homogeneous sample, and then we actually lay it out, quarter it out, and then take a sample out of that, just to get a better representation of that batch.
So this is where it gets very difficult for micro cultivators because, you know, we all have these amazing genetics and we want to do all these small batches and we have 2,100 square feet to work with. And what things that I have seen micro cultivators do is that they come out with 5 or 6 different genetics in this small space. And now they have to get every single batch tested. I did it myself. I totally made that mistake. And when it came to planning, you realize very quickly that every single batch, when it's tested, is going to cost you the same, whether it's 5 kilograms or whether it's 150 kilograms. It doesn't matter. The cost of the testing is going to be the same. So when it comes to, and that's the same, well, and not quite the same for e-beaming though, because e-beaming is, when you get a batch e-beamed, it really goes on kind of the weight. And we're going to touch on that in a second. But really, I encourage micros to look at their business plans and their business models, that when you're making these plans is that you come out with a great genetic that you're proud of, and then you do a different one the next round. Come out with a bigger batch if you can, because you are going to face much more costs, and it's easier, or I should say more cost effective, to spread that one cost over one batch as opposed to multiple batches. And then Raj, when we get into the irradiation side of things, how do the costs vary with regards to the batches?
Thanks, Kelly. The cost for sterilization or antimicrobial treatment, whether it's packaging or pots, trays, cannabis in bulk or cannabis in final packaging, it can vary in general, but lots that are brought to us, if there's multiple lots brought to us, we just treat it as one order. We don't break it up as individual lots and create separate orders based upon the number of lots. So there's no real impact to the grower when they bring us product, if it's multiple lots or a single lot. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, I mean, basically what I was getting at is that, basically it's based on weight, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, so it's charged out by kilogram. So on the producer side, they're going to get their lot tested, but on the processor side, then a determination of a preventative measure like irradiation would have to be determined by whether you're going to irradiate. You've got this product brought in, say it's going to go into pre-rolls, or say it goes into oils or or some other product, you could get the packaging might need to be irradiated. So like these are other things that we start getting into that as you get into processing get a little bit more complicated. That's kind of where I was going with that. So anything else that I've kind of missed here? Nina.
Yeah, so I was thinking that Raj would mention that the cost also depends on the final packaging. So if the product has been packaged in retail units, there is a premium price for irradiation. Am I right, Raj?
It's not necessarily a premium price, but we do have a handling fee for boxes that contain final packaged product. And to be fair, if you brought us a box of pre-rolls, which is theoretically very light in product weight, if we didn't have a handling charge associated with it, we would be running it for next to nothing, losing money. If we applied the pricing model of cannabis to the pre-rolls or other final product. So that's where that handling fee comes in for final packaged product.
Okay. So then looking at something like concentrates, if you were to get your product e-beamed after packaging, looking at the style of packaging that you're doing would be key, like glass versus, putting something in bags per se. Is that that'll affect the difference? Is there a premium price then that increases to, say, a lighter product?
Not necessarily. Final packaged product could be in jars or pouches or pre-rolls. What we do is we work with the customer to ensure that they package it efficiently so that when we are handling it, we're trying to handle as much product that we can take and place on our trays or in our carriers without it comes down to efficiency. So we try to work with customers to ensure that they are efficient in their packaging manner so that we can be efficient in how we process their product. So,
and there's minimums on that weight, right?
Minimums for final packaging, not necessarily. So we don't have minimum requirements for product weight, but we do have minimum orders or threshold for a single run that we do have for sure. Yeah.
Okay. So another tip I would give to small micro license holders is, and this is something that we at the ACMLA are kind of working towards as well, is piggybacking. Basically you two micros can get together, you make sure your harvest schedules line up so that you can send in a full load for e-beaming to make sure that you don't get basically charged for nothing. If you're under that, I think it's around 25 or 28 kilograms is kind of where that, that minimum, there's a minimum amount that you can send in. So I do recommend that micro license holders work together if you're going to do small batches, or get in a really good relationship with your processors, because if they're sending in batches, then you can build that relationship, send that batch into them, and they can put it all together. So that's another part of your qualifying who's going to process your packet, your product as well.
One consideration, Kelly, on that is that we aren't able to break out certificates of processing for different or individual processors or companies. So you have to be, if you're going to do that, and I can see where that would be beneficial for the micros, just know ahead of time that if you're looking for paperwork and documentation that's specific to your organization or your facility, it does become a bit sticky when you try to break out the paperwork between two facilities.
Yeah, as long as the batch numbers and the lot numbers and the cultivar name, everything that's Health Canada approved is in that information. One company has to be responsible to Sterigenics for the payment, for that type of getting the paperwork and whatnot. But as long as you have the information of the lot numbers, as according to for Health Canada, we as small operators, when these type of costs come across, we need to find ways to find efficiencies, and that is working together. As long as we have the right paperwork and the right processes in place, I think that's how we get there. I love what you folks do. I think it's very important in an industry, especially right now when the supply chain is so long from start to finish. We send out a product, it goes from our facility to a processor, then to the distributor, which is the province oftentimes, and then it could be sitting in their warehouse for a long time. Then it goes to the retail store, and now you've got 6 to 8 months in between from when you harvested to when the product hits the market. And that's not going to change right now until we really start changing some of these, not requirements, but the way the supply chain is handled, whether farm gate comes to play. Just these are things that we have to look at as micros, and it does make it very difficult for us to operate and save money. Well, thank you all so very much for all the information that we received here today. I learned a lot. I always do in these types of panels. So thank you all for joining us today at the Growers Summit. We can't wait to see you all next year.
Thank you, Kieley.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Kieley.
Thank you, Kieley, for moderating this so well.